started. Thanks everyone so much for joining us today. What we're going to talk about at today's PO monthly touch point is our vision for the learning community that we're developing. So we shared a little bit of information with you about this previously, but we didn't have a lot of details. And so we were working on developing out what that would look like and revamping some of our initial ideas. And today we're going to have Laria Young, who is part of our informatics team, kind of talk you through what our vision for that is going to be and what that's going to look like so that you feel prepared. And after Laria introduces the concept of the learning community, I'm going to go through and talk about how that impacts the VBR requirements for your practices and exactly what that will look like. There's not really any major changes, just to have some additional details to share with you that will hopefully provide some clarity on what that will look like. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Laria.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. I'm going to go ahead and do my screen share here. All right. I'm hoping everyone can see that. All right. So thank you, Jackie, for that introduction. My name is Laria. I'm a member of the informatics team working with MCT2D, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this model that we've been envisioning for the learning community. We really want this to be a helpful, supportive part of this initiative. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it and then open it up for questions. And Jackie will talk a little bit more about the VBR component. So the first thing I want to address is that this represents a name change. We were originally referring to this as the Learning Collaborative, and we are now going to be calling it the Learning Community. And we decided to make this name change, one, for clarity, because MCT2D already uses the word collaborative. We wanted to emphasize that this was a component of it, as well as really emphasizing the fact that part of the role of this is to build community within the collaborative itself, and have a place where people can come together and share information and build out that way. So to talk just a little bit and give a brief overview about the goals for the Learning Collaborative. So the why behind this is to support and empower members of MCT2D. And we want to do this through community building, trust building, and knowledge sharing, and using really rich, deep, clear, professionally curated tools and interactions that the community can all benefit from. And so our model for this is for MCT2D to work with and collaborate with community members and participants of MCT2D to really understand what the questions, challenges, and needs are of using these interventions and being part of this collaborative. And then work with members to help address those, to build out a really rich tool set, to host online events and things like that that really help empower the community. And MCT2D will work to publish this content through a variety of channels, including emails, social media, through our website, as well as those live training and events. In addition to this, we're working on a component that includes regional pods that will let people and participants in different regions across the state have really case-specific conversations and offer individualized support that may be particular to their region, and also offer an opportunity again for sharing information that we cannot do over public channels. So in terms of content, we really want to work on building not what we want or what we think that you need, but build what you need in order to be able to use these initiatives and be part of MCT2D. And we've already started trying to get an understanding and talking to our members about what those needs and challenges are. So these are some example responses that came through from our case summaries that people have submitted. And so we're really excited to hear about all the different things that people feel like they need to be able to use these initiatives going forward that we feel like we can provide and incorporate into this community. So these are things like medication samples, fast food nutrition booklets, and other educational material, unconscious bias training, tips for helping patients make behavioral changes and things like that. And the way this learning community will work is we're going to be able to deliver this content that we work with our participants to develop through multiple channels. Our goal is to really make this easy and low barrier. We want to deliver this to you in a way that's easy and accessible. So one example of this will be, we'll be starting a monthly e-newsletter that's really going to highlight what the new content is, those upcoming events, invite people to participate, and offer multiple low barrier ways to engage with the community, which Jackie will be talking a little bit more about as part of the VBR piece. So some of the example content that this will include are things like tools that we're working on developing, things that you've told us that you need, discussion questions for regional pods and for other online Q&A style events that we have, video series and educational learning modules that people can participate in, and really give a way for the community to get involved in telling us and giving us feedback on those tools, telling us what's been useful for them and what they need more support on. And we also want to work with the POs to offer opportunities to review this content before it's distributed to members. In addition, we're building out a page on our website that will sort of serve as a homepage and a hub for this community. Again, featuring those events, offering registrations, offering ways for people to interact and continue their education as part of these initiatives, multiple ways for people to submit questions or challenges they're having and provide feedback to us, news and events that's relevant to the community, as well as a hub for recordings, tools, and discussions that have occurred previously. As part of this also, we'll be hosting live Q&A and AMA events with dietitians, endocrinologists, pharmacists, patients, and other people who can bring their expertise to this community. And this will offer people an opportunity to ask questions in a live format, get feedback, and hear examples of other people's experiences with these interventions. In addition, we have a resource library that we have been working really hard to build out on the website, and we will continue building this out with our community. And so one of the tools that we heard from the community that they really needed and wanted was support in getting coverage and understanding coverage for these different medications. So this is one example of the type of resources and tools that we hope to develop and distribute to the learning community. So just a brief estimated timeline here. We're now announcing this to you now, this new model. In February, we will be sending out a welcome newsletter, inviting all members to the community and explaining what it is, starting with our collaborative regional meetings in April, and then plan to start delivering content on a monthly basis and hosting those live events and things like that in June. So that was a brief overview. Before I turn it over to Jackie, I want to open it up for any questions, or Jackie, if you have any other additional comments you want to add.
I just want to clarify that the original vision of like this program that we talked about previously was more of like a forum submission where your practices would be asking questions and other providers may be answering it. I think this model that Laria and the informatics team developed is a lot more conducive to making sure that information that's needed is shared more broadly and is a lot more helpful to the practices. So I'm glad that we're making this change. So Erica had a question in the chat. Do all members include clinical champions or just PO contacts when speaking about the newsletter? So we typically have been communicating through you as the POs, but if that was something that everyone was comfortable with us sharing more broadly to the clinical champions, I think that would be nice to do. It saves you from having to kind of forward that on, but you would also be receiving that information. So if anyone is uncomfortable with it being sent to the clinical champions at your practices, let me know, but otherwise we would share that more broadly.
Yeah, I think I can add to that too, Jackie. I think our preference would be to be able to send it to clinical champions and to everyone who wants to receive that newsletter. But we'd love to work with you on what feels the most comfortable. And so one of the things could be working on a system of passive consent or approval where we share that beforehand for any feedback, or work with you to develop a way for you to then distribute it out after it's been created.
There's another question of, can you have the copy of the PowerPoint? Yep, we will send the slides following this call in a PDF format that you can share onwards. Any other questions at this time?
Yeah, and thank you so much again. We're really excited about this and about getting to work with you, I think, to make this community really come together. So thank you for your time.
Okay, great. And I'm going to now go over the VBR and what that looks like. We'll talk about the case summaries first, which I know we've shared information on already, but just as a quick reminder and a small update about that. And then we'll talk specifically about how the learning community, how we're capturing that in the VBR as well. So go ahead to the next slide, Laria. So this is just a high level reminder of kind of the general participation expectations of MCT2D at this time. So we're expecting all the physicians and the healthcare providers and the practices to work on incorporating the 3 strategies, which I know everyone on this call is very familiar with, to improve care for their patients with type 2 diabetes, the increasing prescribing of SGLT2s and GLP-1s, increasing the use of CGMs, and promoting low-carb diets. So for this initial year, which the VBR year for PCPs started on October 1st, 2021, and goes through to that this year. And then it's going to align with the normal PCP VBR. So for year 2, it's going to technically start 9/1, so that we're not that 1 month off cycle. The reason that that was the case for the first year was just because Blue Cross was still determining the incentive and what that was going to look like, which caused that kind of 1 month delay, but we'll be on that same schedule going forward. And then for any participating specialists and any PCPs that joined by the 11/15 deadline, their VBR is going to be starting in a couple weeks on March 1st. We're going to be talking mostly about the PCP measures on this talk though. And then all of these are participation based, as you've seen. We're right now looking at the possible measures that we could do for like one performance-based measure for this next year of VBR and working out what will make sense. And we will run that by the steering committee that we've developed, made up of PO and practice participants and MCT2D, and share it with you when we get to that point. But we're still in our early stage of determining what that performance measure will be. So talking about the participation ones for year 1 now. Go to the next slide, Laria. So this is what we originally shared as the VBR measures for year 1, and I'm going to highlight the ones on the next slide that are relevant to each physician, but you can kind of see the different levels of responsibility that these are at. Most of them are practice level things. So the practice does this and it's complete, like the practice change readiness assessment and the clinical champion and practice liaison, letting us know who those are. Then the clinical champions have a little bit higher level of responsibility that you've been understanding as well around the training sessions, and which, as a reminder, all need to be completed by the end of March, and they're all virtual. If you need me to resend that information to you of how to get signed up for your clinical champions, let me know. And we'll also be sending a follow-up soon to anyone who hasn't has pending completed trainings, just so you're aware, but you can also view that on your MCT2D administrative dashboard. And then the other clinical champion one is attending the spring and fall regional meeting. Larry, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk about the next 2. So we've highlighted the 2 that each physician that is earning VBR has to complete. So the 2 of these are the case summaries that we've sent out that talks about like the decision making and the challenges and the outcomes of trying one of these interventions with the patient, which I'll get into a little bit more detail on. And then now with this new learning community, we have 2 different engagement levels that we need to complete 1 activity each by each physician in the collaborative. And we'll look at those in just a few slides as well. And go next, Larry. So the case summaries, we sent out an email about that a couple of weeks ago about the expectations around that, how to access them. The most important thing to take away from this right now is that we had the deadline of 3/31 because we wanted to use some of this information to guide the regional meetings. However, we've had a few POs reach out and say that their practices felt like that timeline was too tight. And we want to make sure that we're giving everyone ample time to do these requests as opposed to creating this really tight, unworkable timeline for everyone. So thank you to the POs that reached out to us and let us know that they felt this was a little too difficult. That said, we're extending it now to June 1st so that your practices have ample time to see a patient, try these interventions, and then have some kind of feeling about how it went. So a little bit more time. 1 second. There's a question in the chat that we'll read. So practices are expected to make changes to include all 3 of the interventions. So ideally, what would happen is for the 3 case summaries, they would try each one once. They don't need to change. So you asked if a primary care practice has historically referred patients who need a CGM to an endocrinologist, then they could not continue that process, but would need to start providing that intervention themselves. No, that is not the case. We're not asking you to change what's happening to like get that patient a CGM. If that's working for them, they're referring to an endocrinologist and they never prescribe them themselves. They have 1 of 2 options. They could either not submit a case summary about the CGM, Or they could still, depending on their level of involvement and how much they're talking to the endocrinologist, still provide some feedback on how that went for the patient. So I'm assuming they're still doing some level of follow-up with that patient and are seeing them later. And maybe they talked to the patient about the CGM and they loved it and their A1C's down. That would still be valid as a case summary. So as long as patients are getting these interventions, however you're partnering with other providers to make sure that happens is fine. We don't want you to change what's been working well for your practices. So in a perfect world, there would be one case summary submitted for each intervention, but that's not a requirement. But we would like people to try all three of them if they can. But for cases such as the one that you just presented, Chelsea, we wouldn't ask them to change their process. So hopefully that clarifies. So continuing on, we've given information about a couple different ways you can access these, both via links, a link on our website, etc. And it has to be linked to the physician who is earning VBR because it's tied to that funding that they're earning from Blue Cross. But a care manager can submit it. Someone else who partnered with the physician on this case can submit it on their behalf and just work with them to fill out this information. It just needs to be linked back to the physician who is earning VBR. And like we said, there needs to be a bit of time between when the intervention is prescribed and when you're giving this response, just based on the challenges and what you've been able to experience with that patient. So hopefully this new deadline is helpful and gives everyone an appropriate amount of time to be able to do this. And then we'll be able to share some results and findings from this initial case summary, because it's only one that needs to be completed by 6/1 to clarify. They do not all three need to be submitted. And we'll be able to share some kind of results and summaries from that with you at the collaborative wide meeting that's occurring in June. So go next slide. And we've also included the information here as well that was in my email about how you can submit it. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll send out this PowerPoint to you afterwards, so you can send this on to your providers so that they have this information easily accessible and are able to do this and find the link as easy as they can. Next. So the last VBR measure we wanted to talk about and how it changed is the one about the learning community. So previously, and what you'll see in your documentation, we'll send out updated documentation soon, was a requirement to participate in the MCT2D Learning Collaborative one time. So now that we've kind of revamped what this is from like a forum style question and answer to this new design that Laria talked about, we are asking that providers participate in one learning community activity for each of the 2 engagement levels. So completing 2 activities total over the course of this kind of VBR year. Next slide. So the first engagement activity is the level 1 one. So there are 2. There's 2 kind of options here. Well, technically 3. There's an early adopter option. And what that involves is testing, such piloting a learning community tool and providing feedback on its use in a clinical setting, and that we're going to list the tools available for feedback. So this will be things like the insurance coverage document that we've shared, or the GLP dosing, or the decision algorithm, those types of things, where we would just ask that your providers try them with a patient and then fill out this very, very brief survey just to say, like, yeah, this tool worked for me and had all the information I needed, or I wish this had information about X, Y, and Z as well, just so that we can refine the things that we've made for the collaborative and learn what else is needed and how it's actually working in a clinical setting, as opposed to, just what we've created at this point without having it being tested within the setting. So we're hoping that this will help us to be able to make the tools that we've created even more useful to the providers. So those will be available along the timeline that Laria shared earlier, so that providers could try them and then really just complete this brief form about their experience and what they've learned. So the other 2 level 1 engagement activities are under this category called head of the class. So there's 2 options there. One is we're going to develop learning pathways. So these might be like shorter kind of educational videos, similar but different from the trainings that we've created. They're not going to be an hour long like the required trainings we have for the collaborative, but we might have a 10-minute video about how to overcome injectable hesitance with a patient and some accompanying tools with that. So it would be watching that video, and then again, kind of giving a short evaluation, similar to what you did with the tools, to say like, yeah, I learned about this and I feel more comfortable doing this with my patients, or I need someone to tell me what to say in this situation with a patient, etc. So just to kind of get more feedback, learn what else needs to be covered so that we can make these better for everyone who will be using them. And then the second option under that is attend live learning events hosted by the collaborative. So we are going to come up with some kind of educational series, maybe panels with some experts across the practices and POs, or from our coordinating center, who are going to have like specific topics. These will be optional, similar to how all of these things are optional. You just have to do one of them to kind of get this requirement. So that's another option that we're going to create and have available, is just kind of specialty topics around certain specific things that are more of a live discussion and Q&A, as opposed to the learning pathways, which will be pre-recorded. So attending one of those and learning about the topic that we're covering at that. Next slide. So these are the level 2 activities. And once again, the VBR requirement is you complete one level 1 and one level 2 for each provider that is earning VBR. So there's two kind of categories under here as well. The first is CQI influencer. So we want to expand the information that we're sharing. So we want to do some things like creating a blog or a podcast. So that would be being willing to kind of talk to someone on our informatics team about their experience, share some information, answer some questions, so that we can use that to help educate others within the collaborative and share the expertise that are, among the physicians that are participating. And then the second under CQI influencer would be to share your expertise at a live event as a panelist. So that kind of is the more extensive option of the attending version. And the reason these are level 1 and level 2 is because some of these activities, as you can see on the level 2 ones, are a tiny bit more extensive than the level 1 ones. So we wanted to split them out because we wanted to make sure that we have people who will participate as panelists, or we can like generate some content as opposed to just taking in that content and giving feedback. So the final is patient champion. So that would be referring a patient to our CGM data sharing program. So we've created a brochure that talks about 2 patients that's intended for the provider to distribute to them, around adding MCT2D as a clinic that they're sharing their CGM data with, so that we can get and analyze some CGM data from patients as well. So if your provider can have a patient agree to participate and share their CGM data with MCT2D using that brochure and giving them a tiny bit of information about the program, and they share it, that meets the level 2 requirement. So that's just to be able to see change across the collaborative at a higher level around the CGM usage. Second would be gather feedback from a patient on one of the patient-facing learning community tools. So for example, we're about to fill our dietitian role that we have posted. We're hoping to create a lot of patient-focused low-carb materials, like Laria and the team have already made a diet tracking log. We're going to make more tools around that. And then, finding out from a patient, was this helpful to you? So again, you can kind of see the different level of intensiveness of this versus giving feedback as a provider. And this one, you kind of need to engage with one of the patients and learn about if it was helpful to them. And that, of course, has the same intent as our review process for the provider ones. We want to make sure that the patient created tools that we're making resonate with patients and they understand them. We will, of course, run patient tools past our patient advisory board as well, but want to get additional feedback from patients who are actively trying to use these to make changes in their lifestyle. And then the final one under patient champion would be referring a patient to our patient stories video documentary series. So you'd seen some of those short patient stories at our kickoff meeting, where patients just talked with our design team about their experience with CGM or low carb diet or the medication. So if a provider has had a patient who has had a really good experience with one of these interventions, it may be worthwhile to ask them if they would participate in this video documentary series and just talk with us briefly about how it went and how it helped them. And that would, again, meet that level 2 engagement activity. Next slide. Well, before we talk about this, I will go through and read some of the questions that have been coming through in the chat. So we'll pause there and then we'll cover this last thing. So the first couple are related to the case summaries. Can this be a historical patient? So a patient was prescribed one of the interventions last year and had a follow-up after. Yes, that would be fine. I think for this initial one, that would be okay to do. Technically your providers are participating in the collaborative at this time, so I think that's okay. And then maybe for the next future ones, once they have some of the resources and training that they've experienced through MCT2D, it might be helpful to do a future one with a more recent patient. But for the one that you're submitting for this first deadline, that would be fine. The next question is also about the case summaries. Is the 6/1 deadline for specialists as well, or just PCPs? So that would be just PCPs. What we're doing with the specialists is going to be a little bit different. Their VBR timeline is different, so they haven't started earning the VBR yet, and we're going to give them a broader range of time to fill that out. And the questions are going to look a little bit different for the specialists because what we're asking them to do is going to look a little bit different. So what we're thinking at this time, and we will share more information with you once we have it as well, is for the endocrinologist, instead of it being like a case summary with the exact same questions that we're asking the PCPs, we were hoping to get into more of what their care coordination looks like with PCPs on a specific case. So that's what we were planning for the endocrinologist one. And for the nephrologist one, we're in development on that one as well. And it's going to be a little bit more similar to the PCPs, kind of a case reflection around the medications and around urine albumin testing, since those are the two interventions that we're focusing on specifically for the nephrologist. And again, we'll have more details to come on those as they develop, but they won't have a due date until much later in the year as we kind of develop these and take into account their VBR timeframe, which is starting in March. And there was a question, can you review again the requirements for level 1 and level 2? Physicians seem to do both level 1 and level 2. So yes, they need to do one activity each from level 1 and level 2. So Laria, can you pull up those slides again really briefly? And what that means, so here's the level 1 ones again. There's these 3 activities that are listed under one of the headings. So as an example, if I'm a VBR earning physician at one of your practices, maybe what I do for level 1 is I take the one of the decision support algorithms for the SGLT2s and GLP-1s. I try that actively in the office with a patient to decide what to prescribe them. After I do that, I'm going to go to the learning community website, and there's going to be like a 5 or 6 question little survey about the tool and if it was useful and if it gave them what they need. I would fill that out. I would submit it. My level 1 requirement would be complete. You could do just one of these 3 things. I'm just doing that one as an example. So if you want to go to the next slide, Laria. So then me as that same physician have to meet one of these level 2 requirements as well. There's 5 options here split into these 2 categories. So what I may do in that case to meet my level 2 requirement is I have a patient who's being prescribed a CGM. I have the brochure that MCT2D has created about sharing the data, and I talk through them with, hey, you're going to share our data with our clinic too. I'm part of this quality initiative that's working on improving type 2 diabetes care across the state of Michigan. They are going to collect CGM data. Would you be willing to share it with them? The patient says yes. They share it with MCT2D. The level 2 requirement is met. That provider is then done. They have completed all of their requirements for their learning collaborative. That was just a high-level example that just went through what it may look like for an individual provider. Did that clarify, or does anyone have any questions about like what the requirements are?
Jackie, this is Chelsea. I don't have a question about what the requirements are, only just how are we going to be able to monitor when they've met these? Will that be through like our PO dashboard?
Correct. Yep. We are going to implement this into the PO dashboard. And then what we're going to do as MCT2D is just track, hopefully automatically, when they're completed, and it will just go. So we'll likely separate it out. Right now, it just says learning community in development. It's on there, but there's nothing into it. What we'll probably do is split it out into learning community level 1 activity, learning community level 2 activity for every provider that's listed there. And then when they meet one, you'll be able to see like, okay, this provider's met their level 1 requirement, this provider's met their level 2 requirement, but still needs to do level 1, this one's met both, it is all set. So we're going to revamp what we have in your admin dashboard a little bit to reflect this, and you'll be able to see which ones they've met, which ones they haven't. So that's something that we're going to build out. There's a question about when these are due. So it will be, we're going to give up to the end of the VBR year to do these. So Laura, can you go to your timeline again briefly? Thank you. So we are going to have like the welcome newsletter sent out in April and the learning events beginning in June, and sometime within this April-May timeframe, we'll have some of these things available already. So we'll be able to have things like, well, really the tool development we can have really, really soon to give feedback on that. Same with the patient tools, the learning events. If they want to participate in one of those, it's going to be a little bit later that can start in June. What I'll do is send an email right now and let you know which, if, well, none are available right now, but we'll try to give you an estimated timeline for each of the level 1 activities, each of the level 2 activities, and when it should be available for providers to start participating in. And then they'll have until like the end of September to complete those and meet that requirement. So a couple other questions, and Blair, I'll get to yours as well. Do providers have to log in to record this information, such as referring a patient, or can their care manager log it for them? So their care manager can log it for them. So for some of these things, the way we'll track this is just have them enter their name for some of these, like piloting a tool or like signing into a meeting. We'll be able to see based on who registered. But for things like their care manager submitting a patient, like for like the sharing, we'll link it back to the practice and figure out a way to link it to that provider. But no, it does not need to be the physician specifically submitting like a patient summary or patient story or getting the feedback from the patient. Really, all of the patient ones specifically could be handled with the care manager, and that would be fine. Blair, to your question about the dashboard for endocrinology practices, we don't have it yet because I'm waiting for Blue Cross to confirm all of the providers that will be receiving VBR. So we sent them a list of all the providers in those endocrinology practices that should be earning it. And I just need their final say on like, yes, all of these providers are going to be earning it. I don't want to put someone in there that for some reason wouldn't get VBR, though I don't think that will be as much of an issue with the specialty practices. For some of the PCP ones, they have requirements around PCMH status and things like that that impacted if a provider could earn it or not. So since the VBR is starting 3/1, I think Blue Cross is very, very close to having that list like completely finalized. And once they get back to us to say, okay, yes, these providers absolutely will be earning VBR, that's when we'll build that out. We have it set up and ready to go. We just need to drop in the names there. So that should be available to you soon. What other questions do people have? Okay, so we can go to the last slide, Laria, which is just a really brief update. We are posting these PO monthly touch points per request that we received on the last call. We've been recording these and they're posted on our YouTube channel. So it's just Michigan Collaborative for Type 2 Diabetes. And I've linked it in these slides that we're going to send out after. We'll post this one later too if you want to share it or refer back to it at any point. And you can also see these on our website under the members section as well, that has a lot of useful information that will also have like the PO calendar and other things that we've sent out to you recently too. So we just wanted to let everyone know that you can view these there, and we'll get these slides out to you so you can easily access this. And that is all that we had for you today. Does anyone have any questions either about the learning community, the specific VBR requirements, or really anything else that's going on? Okay, well, I will stay on for a little bit longer in case anyone does have any questions. Other than that, everyone have a great day, and we really appreciate you joining today, and happy Valentine's Day.
You as well, Jackie. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I will go ahead and end the call then. Thank you, everyone. Oh, wait. Yeah, Susan, I can I'll create a table that includes like what I just said about when these will be available. And I'll try to give a specific example for each one, like I did when going through it and around what that might look like. So yep, we'll create a table that provides some additional details. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end the call. Have a great day.